Hello, Rumcasters, and welcome back with us and into 2021. This is John, as always, your host, and on the other side is Will Hukinga, and it's been a great 2021 so far. A lot of interesting things in rum happening, and I'm looking forward to talking about those in some new segments. Will, how about you?
Yeah, I was all, geared up, fired up for this episode. I'm really excited about the interview we have in this episode. Teased it a little bit in our year in review episode previously.
Yeah.
But I was, all geared up yesterday. We were planning to record today, and then I get a text from you, as you like to do, throwing a brand new idea for a little intro segment my way. And so I've been scrambling, trying to prepare myself, trying to, provide as great rum content as I can, for all the rumcasters out there.
I can't control when the good ideas come. They come when they come.
Exactly. You were at the mercy of your own good ideas. So I'm excited to try this little new segment out before we get into the interview. So why don't you tell the people what we're in for today?
Sure. So the idea was essentially a short segment for us to do where we look back in our rum cabinets and in our rum experiences and pick out a rum to talk about that we wanted to bring back to the table. A lot of attention is put on new rums, I think.
Sure.
And new things come into market, which is, of course, exciting. We want to continue to do that. But at the same time, there's so much great rum from yesteryear, and it doesn't have to be long, long ago. It just could be something that you experienced again recently, and we're like, wow, this is just really great. And so I thought, let's bring that back to the table in a short segment where you and I can each talk about one of the rums we've brought back out from our cabinet, and we can call it a re-rum. What do you think?
Re-rum. Yeah, no, I love it. I think one of my favorite things about rum is I think a lot of people, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I think you kind of go through this mode when you're getting into rum where like you want to try like all the rums and you're just like plowing through like you're almost not buying the same bottle twice very often in the early days because you just want to, there's so much out there. And I think over time you start to go back to stuff, and I personally find that like my impressions of different bottles really evolve over time. I'll have something that I had previously and have a different impression, so I think that's the whole kind of spirit of the idea you had for this, which I like a lot. So I think we're going to try to keep it brief, but re-rums. We've each prepared a re-rum, and I'm excited to hear what yours is. Do you want to jump in?
Well, before I say what the rum is for my re-rum today, I will say that it's not intended to be something that is going to be a huge, long review or anything like that, at least in my mind. It's like you said, a short form, kind of going back over the rum itself. And also, to your point, is you can re-experience these rums at different days and find different things about them, which is really cool, whether it is something different you ate or, how you felt that day, who knows? But I think it's really cool to go back and experience these rums that we haven't had in a while. So with that, here's my pick. I'm going to go with the first re-rum ever for me is Moba Rum, American Oak Aged South African.
Going down to South Africa.
Yeah, so this is a 43% ABV in their line, which they have a line of a lot of different rums and a lot of different ABVs, but this one specifically that I'm talking about today is 43% American Oak Aged. So for those that don't know about it, Moba is a farm-to-bottle rum from South Africa is what they call it, meaning that the cane is grown on site, it's cut, it's pressed, and it's fermented there.
They're relatively new, a few years old at this point, I believe, right? Right.
Yes, and what I love about them is that they're doing everything on site. It's distilled in their own pot stills that they built themselves on site, and initially it's aged for a period of time in a very unique process of like large glass vats shaped like demijohns that they have these American oak staves in for this product, where they also cut and charred those American oak on site and placed it in there. And then finally, this bottling specifically goes through a secondary maturation period in ex-South African whiskey barrels as well. So yeah, needless to say, it's a very unique rum, and I wanted to bring it up because I really enjoy its uniqueness. We've talked before, one of the things that I like is exploring the diversity of rum and its uniqueness, and I really enjoy this product for that specifically.
So was there anything like, what have you noticed about it since the first time you had it to now? Like, when did you first have it, and what has it been like coming back to it now after some distance?
Sure. So I actually, the first time I experienced this was back in 2019 at the International Rum Conference in Miami. Where Knut Strand, who distributes MOBA, is their brand ambassador and head of exports, he introduced it to me then at that conference, and then I got to try it again actually in 2020 at the Miami Rum Congress earlier in 2020. So I was able to experience it there, and I was lucky enough by hook or by crook to get a bottle of it.
Okay.
And
it's hard to come by here in the States. I don't think it's distributed here yet.
It's not, to my knowledge, it's not available directly in the U.S. today, and I thought about that as I was thinking about doing it or not. But it can be purchased in the EU. We have a lot of listeners in the EU and in South Africa, of course, although I think right now their alcohol sales may be suspended.
Right.
That's another episode. But yeah, so here's the thing also, why I wanted to bring it up. I have some breaking news, Will.
Oh,
breaking news here with MOBA, which is I had a quick conversation with a source that I will say remain unnamed at this time.
An anonymous source?
Yes, it'll be anonymous,
okay.
But a good source, one I know to be a good source. And there is going to be MOBA coming to the U.S. in 2021.
Wow. No way.
Yes, I'm told that there will be several interesting bottlings coming to the U.S. in 2021. Well, I don't know if several is a lot, but at least a few or a couple of different bottlings will be coming to the U.S. in 2021.
More than one.
More than one is a good way to put it.
More than one.
Yes.
That's awesome. That's very exciting.
Hoping to get more information out to listeners on that in the very near future, but for now, that's about all we can say. So yeah, on to the actual rum itself. Presentation-wise, first, let me say that I really dig the rectangular bottle design of this, and I really like the flat top cork, and it has like this fire-branded logo, the MOBA logo on top.
I know they do. They like make and print their own labels.
They do.
They have this like crazy, like they like etch the labels into like metal or something on some of them. If I remember correctly, it's something like that.
I don't know enough about it to talk about it, but I do know that it is again unique is the kind of the lead here with this rum, and I like that the labels are small enough that they don't get in the way of showing the great color of the liquid inside, which is like a dark amber. My bottle has a very clear batch number shown right on front, which I really appreciate as well. I will say this is a very slight critique, but what I don't see on the bottle, I wish there was a more indication as to the amount of some of the aging, or at least a clear idea of how long each of those maturation processes was. I
see that a lot. MOBA being a relatively new distillery, I see a similar thing with a lot of craft producers here in the U.S. Sometimes there will be some that use some kind of like wood staves in the aging process rather than doing it 100% in casks the whole time.
Right.
And it can be tough to nail down. Like, if you have a conversation with them, 99% of the time, they'll tell you exactly. But sometimes it's hard to find that information. So I relate to that, It can be tough to nail down, okay, like, how long is it being aged with staves and how long is it in barrels and stuff like that. So I feel you there.
Agree. I presume it was exactly that reason why they had a tough time putting it on the label to start with. And that maybe it changes, because I do know MOBA being small batch and craft distillery, that maybe there's, changes enough that it makes it difficult for them to create labels that work. So that, and my other very small critique is it's a no sugar added product, but it doesn't say that on the bottle anywhere. And I really feel like obviously that's a major sell point, and it would be great to have them add that onto the label at some point somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know what the rules in the EU are, but I do know it can be a challenge when you're trying to add a statement related to no sugar in the US. I think the TTB lately has been requiring producers, if they want to say something about there being no sugar, that they have to have a caloric statement on the back, like kind of a nutrition facts type thing. And, not all of them are going to make the investment to do that. So it can be tricky and phrasing that the right way everything. So again, though, like you said, not in the U.S. yet, so they may not be dealing with the same challenges, but they'll have to cross that bridge when they come over here for sure.
So real quick nose and tasting, and I'll let you get to yours. So nose,
All right.
I get a little bit of toffee and vanilla you'd expect from an aged rum. It's reminiscent to me something of an agricole rum too, which is interesting. So
Well,
I'm not
sugar
sure if
cane
that's,
juice, right?
Yeah. So it's cane juice and it's fermented, but you get a grassy cane note there, and you also get a little bit of smoke. And on the taste, I think that follows through. You get vanilla notes that definitely are present there, and also a little bit of that smokiness in the end.
Okay.
I definitely get the notes that remind me of the agricoles for sure that are there. I think the Lone Caner has a review of the French cask rum, so it's not this one. But he said this about the French cask rum. He said, quote, "It had aspects of an aged agricole and points that reminded me of a Jamaican high ester rum," end quote.
I hear that a lot with MOBA.
Yes.
Is kind of somewhere between those styles. Yeah.
Right. I feel that's definitely similar with this American oak one, though I would say it's less about the high esters and funk in this bottling, and it's more a cross between, I would say, an agricole and a molasses rum almost,
Okay,
is what I'm
interesting.
getting from it. Yeah, I love it. I love the finish on this. It's the 43 ABV doesn't knock your socks off, but to me, it provides plenty of flavor, and I'm kind of finding that there's a sweet spot for me where, similar to the Admiral Rodney that we talked about, which was 40 ABV, there are rums that I like in this category that are pleasing and aren't looking to challenge my palate, that I can just sip on and relax with, and this fits that bill. So
Right.
yeah, that's my first re-rum. I love it. I'm super happy to have this bottle and can't wait to see more MOBA in 2021.
Excellent. And a shout out to Lance from the Lone Caner. We'll link to that review in the show notes. So if you want to get a deep dive on a related similar rum from MOBA, we'll link that up. And on the note of 43% ABV, that actually connects with the rum I've selected for my first re-rum.
Nice.
And I told you in advance that I was going to cheat a little bit, and I'm a boundary pusher. I can't resist. Just bending the rules, just trying to make some noise here
From the start, bending the
stir
rules.
the
Do
pot,
it.
some controversy. Anyway, so
If
the
we
rum
can't
that
do
I've
that
selected,
with our own show, Will.
the rum that I've selected is Appleton's 8-year-old reserve, and so you can maybe see why I'm cheating a little bit here, because the 8-year-old reserve, Appleton, recently within the last year did a revamp of kind of its core lineup. There used to be Appleton Signature, Appleton Reserve, then the Appleton 12-year rare casks. Now, Signature and the 12-year are still the same, to my knowledge, but they replaced the Reserve with this bottle, which is the 8-year-old Reserve. So it's occupying that same space in the lineup, but it's a new blend. It has an age statement, which it didn't previously. So it's been at least over a year since I had the previous Reserve, but I remember buying it at some point. After I'd had the Signature, I'd had the 12-year-old already. I saw the Reserve in the store, and I was like, "Oh, I'll try this one." I went through the bottle, and it wasn't that I didn't like it, but I never had any interest in going back to it. If I was going to the store and I was going to get Appleton, it was always either going to be the Signature or the 12-year from then on out.
It didn't stick out to you. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I gotcha.
It just didn't stick out to me as much as the other two had clear roles for me that the Reserve didn't.
Right.
I like this new 8-year-old so much that it might be the opposite now. It might be a long time before I buy a bottle of the 12-year or the Signature. And it's not the most original rum take to say, "Oh, Appleton 12-year is great." Like we've talked about, it's a universally praised rum. It's affordable. It's quality. It's a rum that I like. But I really love this new 8-year-old Reserve. It's right in this sweet spot of oak. Like you can tell that it's got the age on it, but it's still got all this like pineapple-y, citrusy fruitiness. I've made old fashions with it. I've made Negronis with it. I've had it neat. I've thrown it in a Mai Tai. So it's really in that sweet spot of like, I can do anything with this rum. Including, I think it'll be a great rum going forward that I'm really going to recommend to people who are newer to it. Because, like I said, it just has those notes of things I love about aged rums and things I love a little bit more about the younger Appleton rums historically. And so I really commend them on this blend. I think it's great. It's a quasi re-rum for me because it is a different blend.
Gotcha.
I love this bottle right now.
Let me ask you this: Do you have the old 8-year nearby anywhere?
I don't.
Okay.
I wish I did because I'd love to line them up and compare them.
Yeah.
And I still at some point, while I still have some 8-year left, I need to get the 12 just to compare them. because I'm about at the point where I'm just going to start saying I prefer the 8-year, but I feel like I need to have them side by side to really put that to the test first.
Well, it sounds like a job for Friends of Rum Tennessee Fort to find an old 8-year and get you that so that you can do a side by side with it. That would be cool.
That would be fun. And on that note, the reference you made just then, I was actually talking about this very rum on a discussion I was having with some friends, and it's a new rum group here where I live in Tennessee called Friends of Rum Tennessee.
Yeah.
Just started a guy named Alex Perkins and his buddy Don put it together. We've been doing some twice a month Zoom calls. It's been really fun so far. If you are in the Tennessee area, I'm going to put links to the Facebook group and stuff like that in the show notes. So feel free to come join us.
Yeah. In a future episode, Will, I do want to go through. There's a lot of other rum societies created since our Florida Rum Society episode back last year. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I think there was a recent Facebook thread. I'd love to go over that in a future episode where we can get everybody the information for all the rum societies that are local, not only in the U.S., but there's also some across the world. I've had people contact us from the Philippines recently, from a lot of other different places that you wouldn't expect. Well, I guess rum is everywhere, so I guess I would expect that. But
it's a nice reminder that rum is everywhere.
Right, and it's nice that we're getting to talk to people that are also outside the U.S. to get that different perspective also.
Definitely.
So...
Definitely. Yeah, I think maybe in the next episode we'll devote some time to going through some of those rum societies and putting an easy a page up on the Rumcast website where people can find a rum society, that's
in
close
their
to
area.
them.
Yeah.
So I think on that note, we'll transition now from our Rerums segment to today's interview, which I've already said enough times that I'm very excited about. So we talked to Dr. Frank Ward on this episode, who feels pretty daunting to introduce just because he's influenced the world of rum in so many ways. It's kind of hard to sum it up without feeling like you're not doing it justice. But to give you listeners, kind of the bullet points, Frank was the managing director at Mount Gay from 2005 to 2014. He was at Mount Gay for longer than that, but he was managing director from those years. And that was actually in 2014 was when the distillery was purchased by Remy Cointreau. So he saw the distillery through some really interesting and challenging times, as we'll discuss in the interview. Beyond that, from 2007 to 2017, he was chairman of the West Indies Rum and Spirits Producers Association, which you may know as WIRSPA, an association that essentially exists to promote the Caribbean rum industry, advocate for its producers. And also, if the name Ward sounds familiar to you, it may be because you've seen that well-known Habitation Vellier release called The Last Ward, which, was named after Frank because he distilled it. And on top of all of that, the Ward family actually owned the Mount Gay brand distillery and plantations related to it dating back to the early 20th century. So Frank has had a career that is so fascinating and has touched so many different corners of the rum industry. We talk with him about some Mount Gay history. We talk his whole career. We talk about the Mount Gilboa brand of pure pot still rums that he released, as well as how much of that rum might still be remaining out there. We talk about his time at WIRSPA, the making of the Authentic Caribbean Rum marque. And one note for the end of the conversation, we'd actually wrapped up the interview and we're just chatting, casually, about when the episode would be released. And then all of a sudden we got back into talking about the whole, ongoing Barbados Rum GI discussion. Frank had some thoughts that he really wanted to share. So we flipped the microphones back on, started recording again. So
run it back.
Exactly. Run it back. So we have a little transition to that part at the end of the interview as well. And also one last note in advance, there are a few moments where the audio quality got a little dicey, so I do apologize for that. It's one of the challenges of doing everything via Zoom these days, but stick with it because I don't think you'll regret listening to this conversation. And I'm excited to get into it.
Agree. Let's do it.
If you're listening to us now, there are 6 words about rum that are likely to catch your eye, or ear in this case. Single barrel, cask strength, no additives. Those 6 words are the whole premise of the single cask rum releases from Holmes Key, the sponsor for this episode of the Rumcast. Holmes Key seeks out the world's best rums and releases them unadulterated and at cask strength in limited editions. Check out their website at holmeskey.com to learn about current releases distilled at places like Foursquare in Barbados, Demerara Distillers in Guyana, Travelers Liquors in Belize, and South Pacific Distilleries in Fiji. A new series of limited editions will be released in 2021. Find them at Holmes Key, that's HOLMESCAY.com. All right, so we are here with Dr. Frank Ward. Frank, you're probably one of the most unique guests I think we've had on the podcast so far. I know John and I have both been very excited to talk to you all week. You've been the director at Mount Gay. You were the chairman of WIRSPA for quite a while. I know now you're doing consulting work all over the place. So it's Friday today, and I was curious to ask, where do you typically find yourself on a Friday right now? Do you have kind of a pretty set routine week to week, or does it change depending on what projects you're working on?
It changes depending on what I'm actually doing. Now, I must say that I don't do that much consulting work, and that's by choice. I prefer to have a fairly relaxed lifestyle, very few challenges. So I choose what I would want to take on.
That's a good place to be, I would say, career-wise, when you get to choose to work on what excites you and have more free time. That sounds like a great place to be.
Yeah, well, normally on a Friday, pre-COVID pandemic, 2 or 3 times a month, I would probably be somewhere in the US for the weekend. But after the pandemic, since the pandemic, it's really and truly too much of a pain to go through the rigmarole, not just of travel, but coming back into Barbados, you have to go into quarantine. So I have elected to keep my travel to, well, not just a minimum, but it's non-existent at the moment. And then other than that, I may go to a bar on a Friday evening and have a few drinks with some friends of mine.
It sounds like a great Friday. So before the pandemic, when you were going to the U.S. for most weekends, was there a particular destination you were going to, or just kind of, traveling wherever, your interests took you?
Mostly it was Miami and New York because I have friends there. But
that's right. Okay. Miami. I'm in Miami as well.
John is in Miami, actually.
Miami, New York, but not exclusively. I would go if there is a need other places, but mostly it's Miami, New York.
Okay.
Well, when you're in Miami, we'll get together post COVID, Dr. Ward, and I'll make sure we can hang out. That sounds like a fun time.
Oh yeah, I look forward to that one.
Great.
Yeah, definitely all looking forward to when we can talk about our post-pandemic lifestyles.
Yes.
So I know there are a lot of places we could start a conversation with you about your career, but I think Mount Gay might be the best place. So you were there, I believe, from 98 to 2014 or so, but your family's involvement goes all the way back to the early 1900s. And I'd love if you could give us just, a little history lesson on your family's involvement before we talk about your time there. I think that would be fascinating for listeners.
Yeah. Well, I believe that my great-grandfather bought the Mount Gay estate in 1918, and he, together with his business partner, then really brought Mount Gay rum onto the market, right? The rum was being made before, but the brand itself did not have the recognition that it has today. So it was really due to him and his business partner, John F. Hudson. They really brought the Mount Gay brand to the attention of consumers, not just in Barbados, but in the Caribbean, and then eventually outside of the Caribbean. So that was how it started. And then when he died, one of his sons took over as the managing director of, let me segue here into a little explanation. There were
please segue to your heart's desire.
There were always 2 Mount Gay companies. There was Fairfield and Mount Gay Limited, which owned the plantations. And then there was Mount Gay Distilleries Limited, which was set up specifically to market the product of the actual distillery.
Got it.
Mount Gay Distilleries Limited was never a distillery. It was more a marketing and distribution company.
It was part. I'm not the world's foremost Barbados historian, but I believe I've heard mentioned that in the past, distilleries were not allowed to directly sell their rum as a brand. Is that correct? Weren't they limited to kind of to bulk sales?
That is correct. You could not sell rum from the place where it was made.
Okay, and so that was kind of the reasoning for having the two separate companies.
That is actually correct. And so when A.F. Ward died, one of his sons, Darnley, took over the management of Mount Gay Distilleries Limited. And another son, Lyle, who was my grandfather, he took over the running of the plantations and the Mount Gay Distillery. So
when you say the plantation, that includes the distillery, and then did it also include sugarcane farms and milling facilities and things like that?
That is correct. Mount Gay was just one of the plantations that A.F. Ward owned. And he also owned a sugar mill called Fairfield Sugar Mill. But that is now derelict and the buildings have been demolished. So it no longer exists. So in A.F. Ward's day, it was an integrated operation in that the plantation supplied the cane, the mill ground the mill and produced the sugar, the molasses, and also the electricity for the distillery.
Wow.
Yeah. So and the sugar mill provided the molasses for the distillery. So it was a vertically integrated operation in the early days.
Wow. So I lost count at this point. Are you sixth generation? Fourth. Sorry. Bad math, but as the kind of the world's, I know Mount Gay is remarked as the world's oldest operating distillery. And with that in mind and the Ward family's involvement, a fourth generation person, when they handed you the keys and you took over back in, I believe it was 2005 as managing director, would you describe what that feeling is like for us, taking over that lead role and knowing the significance of Mount Gay in your family's history?
It wasn't what you may think, because at that time, the distillery was going through a very, very challenging period.
I see.
And so it was a great deal of hard work to keep it going.
Gotcha. So it was you didn't have time to savor the moment and enjoy, because you were really taking over to get the company moving through that period, essentially. Got it.
What were some of the factors at the time contributing to hardships that the company was going through?
Well, primarily, by then Mount Gay Distilleries Limited had been sold, the majority interest, first to a subsidiary of the McKesson Corporation. And that was in 1980-81, I believe. And then Remy Cointreau acquired the shares of 21 Brands, the McKesson Corporation subsidiary, in 1989. So the distillery, it's a separate entity, and it always was, and it was called the Rum Refinery of Mount Gay.
So essentially what Remy Cointreau owned at that point was the brand Mount Gay, but not the means of production, the distillery itself.
That is correct. So the distillery produced the rum, and it was then sold because there was an exclusive arrangement between Mount Gay Distilleries Limited and the Rum Refinery of Mount Gay, in that the rum refinery could only sell rum to Mount Gay Distilleries Limited. Mount Gay Distilleries Limited could only buy rum from the Rum Refinery of Mount Gay.
Okay.
So that worked very well at the beginning when the 21 Brands bought into Mount Gay Distilleries Limited. But then over the years, I don't think that contractual arrangement really moved with the commercial dictates as they unfolded over the years. And that basically the rum refinery was still tied to one customer. So it literally was a distillery without a brand. So it was essentially supplying bulk rum to its only customer.
Right. So I guess your fate was really tied to how well that one, customer was performing at
That
any
is
given
correct.
time. Interesting. So what, okay, then it sounds like when you stepped into that role as managing director, it was kind of a challenging time. Obviously, you had to make some tough decisions. So what was it like stepping into that kind of responsibility, and what were kind of some of the first decisions you had to make stepping into that leadership?
I was a part of the organization from 1998, so I was already intimately involved in the decision making process. When I assumed the role of managing director, it was really and truly at a critical transition period in the relationship between the two companies, and that was something that had to be managed carefully.
During that time, do you think some of those difficulties were also indicative of the rum landscape and industry overall in that period? Or was that just something that was really independent to Mount Gay's situation?
Mount Gay's situation, what I'll have to say, the distillery, Mount Gay, the actual distillery, the situation was, as I said, unique in that it was a bulk supplier of rum and it had a single customer. So in 2000, around that time, a little before, I then looked at the idea of the actual distillery coming out with its own brand of rum, and the end result of that was Mount Gilboa.
Right. And what year did that Mount Gilboa come out?
2007.
Got it. So that was part of what you accomplished back when you started in 2005, was getting the Mount Gilboa out.
Yeah, that was really actually my idea. But we had been doing some work on the actual liquid before then.
I see. And speaking of the liquid itself and the rum landscape in that time, were there changes that you perceived in the consumers in that period? And was there an intention behind how you created Mount Gilboa in terms of the rum itself and how you saw rum evolving at that point?
The primary driver for my views on how Mount Gilboa should be was that the distillery was already producing the rum for Mount Gay, the brand, both the column still rum and the pot still rum. So I had a challenge in order to come out with a rum that did not mirror the Mount Gay brand. It had to be completely different.
I see.
You see? So I then hit upon the idea of making it a pure pot still rum, because there are not very many distilleries in the Caribbean that made pot still rum. And certainly there were none at the time that put a pure pot still rum on the market.
Right. So it was less about the landscape of what rum consumers were necessarily looking for, and more about a business decision that made sense from a few different angles for you.
Yeah, because I thought that the actual distillery should have a brand of its own, so that it would basically lessen its dependence on its then single customer. But I also knew that it had to be a rum that would be small batch, low volume, but relatively high price. And that's why I hit upon the need for a unique distillate. So I used the pot still rum as the starting point, but then I changed the way the fermentation and distillation was done for the pot still rum that was made for the Mount Gay brand.
Oh, interesting. So was it like a longer fermentation time or a different yeast, or what were kind of the key differences there?
Well, the main difference is that it's distilled 3 times.
Right. I was wanting to ask about that actually. So please continue.
It was distilled 3 times. And again, we did some trials over the years with various types of distillate, and we went up to 5 distillations. And we did not think that those number of distillations produced an appropriate distillate. So we settled upon the triple distillation. And again, within the distillation, it's not just the triple distillation. How we actually distilled it 3 times was completely different to the way we distilled the pot still rum for the Mount Gay brand.
Interesting. So what do you kind of notice, from a flavor standpoint as you go on with adding more of those pot still distillations on top of one another?
Actually, it's a question of how you distill the previous distillate. So we chose to alter the cuts that we took for each distillation. So it's not simply a matter of saying it's a triple distilled rum. How you actually do each distillation has a very, very big impact on the final taste.
Okay. So then with each distillation, are you making those cuts at different points, maybe, deeper into the tails or not as deep into the tails or that sort of thing?
That kind of thing, yes. So
okay.
I'm not going to say.
Feel free to translate. Feel free to translate my layman's non-technical distillation knowledge. That's why we were so excited to have an expert like you on here, because you're more than qualified than we are to speak on these aspects of rum production.
Well, let's put it this way: the pot still rum that the distillery sold to the Mount Gilboa brand was a double distilled pot still rum, and in the producing of Mount Gilboa, the double distillate did not taste or smell anything like the double distillate that was sold to Mount Gilboa. So even from the first distillation, we made some changes to how I thought the taste and the aroma would develop.
So you're saying that from the same still, a lot of the same variables, you do double distillations, but because the cuts are different, you're going to end up with a very different product.
That is correct.
Yeah, and I think, hardcore rum fans, when they hear the name Mount Gilboa, they remember these releases that you put out, because I know even today, like, they're still pretty sought after at auction.
Yeah, legendary.
Because the production process is so unique. And there were also a few Vellier releases at the time, that people still know. People may recognize your name, in fact, from one that's called The Last Ward, which I believe is rum from that era of production that you're talking about. What's it kind of like now to see, that enthusiasm for those rums still out there on the secondary markets?
It's quite gratifying, but again, the Vellier rums, they were the inventory of Mount Gilboa that we sold after we sold the distillery. The distillery was sold to the Mount Gilboa brand, but we kept the inventory of Mount Gilboa barrels, and we sold them separately. So the Vellier expressions that are on the market now is basically a Mount Gilboa with a little bit more age. Because again, one of the things that I wanted to do was I didn't want the rum to be heavily aged. It's about 4 years old, because I determined that if it was left in the barrel for longer periods, then the distinctive Mount Gilboa flavor would abate somewhat. Because at the 4-year point, one of the distinctive flavors that you get, it's a sort of like coppery flavor. And that would abate over time.
It would get overtaken by the wood, essentially.
Yeah. So I wanted something that was very, very reminiscent of the distillate itself, without too much modification by the wood in the barrels.
So in a sense, that's why the last word is the last word, because even if you had more Mount Gilboa in barrels at this point, it wouldn't give you the same because it's overaged.
I wouldn't say it's overaged. It is going to give you, if you taste the last word now, it doesn't taste like the original Mount Gilboa. Right?
I see.
And that's simply because it's been in a barrel for a much longer period.
So you're saying there are still some barrels of that distillate that haven't been released, is what I'm hearing, right?
Yes, I mean, we sold the complete inventory to Vellier and also to Plantation, Alexander Gabriel.
Okay. So those casks are still out there?
Yes, they are.
Ah, okay. Well, I'm going to have to keep my eyes peeled for when those eventually reach the marketplace, because I'd have to imagine people aren't going to sit on those barrels forever.
Well, it depends on what. I guess Vellier will release its inventory of barrels, Mount Gilboa, over time.
Sure.
Alexander Gabriel, I do not know what he is going to do with his complement of it. You'd have to ask him.
Oh, well, the important thing is now we can ask the tough questions when we talk to those folks. So I want to talk about one of the biggest changes.
Please. I also did a white version.
Ah, okay.
I only sent about 400 cases to my then distributor, Altamar Brands, Lions Brown, in California. And that went very, very quickly. And again, It was a triple distilled white, but it did not have the same flavor profile as the Mount Gilboa brown, because the distillation, the cuts again, were completely different. Because I wanted a white, unaged pot still rum that was drinkable. So it was a much lighter final distillate than Mount Gilboa aging. And I used as a kind of a template, believe it or not, 100% agave tequila.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
What gave you the idea to kind of use that as a starting place?
Simply because tequila, a lot of it is unaged, white, and it commands a premium.
That's true. Yeah.
So,
I mean, or look at the prices that you pay for mezcal, which you can, for a nice bottle of that, you can easily start at over $100.
Yeah. So I understand that there are some limitations in terms of the supply of the raw material, the agave plant itself. But still, my basic thing was, why is it that you can have an unaged white spirit like tequila selling for a hefty premium, and unaged white rum is really at the bottom of the price point? So
You have a great point.
I try to address that with the Mount Gilboa one. But I only made, I think, about 400 cases. And they went to the US and they've been sold. We still have 1 or 2 cases left here in Barbados. I have some in my own personal collection. I also have the oldest barrel extant of Mount Gilboa, which I bought from the company when we had started really laying the rum away in a serious fashion.
Well, don't share too much information about the exact locations of those bottles, or you're gonna have to start, putting up no trespassing signs to keep all the rum enthusiasts away from your stash.
But I'd also say, if one of those happens to come with you on one of your trips to Miami, someone who would appreciate it.
Well, with my bottle, I intend to, next year it'll be 15 years old. And I intend to just decant a few bottles in, say, 500 ml volumes and just give them away to friends. It's not something that I'm going to sell commercially.
Well,
gotcha.
That sounds like a great gift for those lucky friends. And yeah, I mean, when you talk about unaged 100% pot still Barbados rum, I have a tough time thinking of other examples of that on the market that are easily accessible to anyone. So I can see why that would be such a special release to put out there. So one of the biggest changes that happened during your time at Mount Gay was, as we discussed, Remy Cointreau owned the brand Mount Gay, but then in 2014 they purchased the refinery as well. What was it like going through the process of making that sale, and what were kind of the biggest changes that happened as a result of it?
Well, the process itself was somewhat torturous because the distillery had about 50-something shareholders, and not everyone was in favor of selling to Remy Cointreau. It was a very good business decision because, one, the distillery itself was really too small to continue to exist on its own with essentially still a single customer. The Mount Gilboa brand was still new, and it was a small volume, so it could not have carried the distillery and pay the expenses, et cetera, et cetera. So the decision was taken that this would be a good time to sell the distillery, right? Because unless the shareholders are willing to invest massive amounts into the distillery, seek new markets, and you're starting from basically zero, that was going to be a very tall order for a very small distillery.
And so, once the acquisition went through, what were kind of the most immediate changes that happened after that?
I don't think there were any major changes because once the acquisition went through, I stepped out of the picture completely. Yeah?
Okay.
So Remy Cointreau would have to answer that, but I think in the beginning there were not that many major changes where you would have seen a change in the flavor profile of the rum, because while the distillery was sold, the key personnel like the distillery operators, the ones who did the actual fermentation and distillation, they were retained by Mount.
Right.
So there was a great deal of continuity there.
So, and shifting away a little bit from your role at Mount Gay into your other well-known role, from 2007 to 2017, you were also the chairman of the West Indies Rum and Spirits Producers Association, which is commonly referred to as WIRSPA. And as I understand it, WIRSPA is essentially an association that exists to promote the Caribbean rum industry, and it advocates for its producers in various ways. And before we get into what you did during your time at WIRSPA, how did you even become involved with that in the first place?
I became involved with WIRSPA as soon as I joined the rum refinery Mount Gay. I started attending WIRSPA meetings because the organization, it's an association of associations. So no single distillery is a member of WIRSPA. It's the national association in each island that is a member of WIRSPA.
I see.
Right? So I used to attend as part of the Barbados delegation.
When you have those meetings with all these associations that are members of WIRSPA, is everyone, like bringing their little private stash of rum samples and swapping and everything like that? What is that atmosphere like?
At the end of the meeting, we generally have a cocktail reception, and yes, each country would bring its own special offerings. So it was a very convivial atmosphere, and I can tell you that you would be tasting rums that would not have been easily accessible to a lot of people. As a matter of fact, in the later years, when I was the chairman, the WIRSPA cocktail parties, it was probably the occasion where nearly all of the Caribbean rum brands had offerings that could be sampled.
Huh. Will, it sounds like you and I need to attend some WIRSPA
Yeah, we
meetings.
got to find a way to kind of get in through the back door in some way, because that sounds like fun. So Frank, what were kind of, we mentioned that time range 2007 to 2017 when you were chairman. What were kind of the organization's biggest priorities or challenges, and what kind of goals did you have for it during your time as chairman?
Well, of course, the organization was set up as a trade association to promote the interests of the Caribbean rum producers. And there were originally 4 members, Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana. And over the years, it expanded to include the OECS, and also Dominican Republic, Belize. So we pretty much covered the countries that were former colonies of European countries.
Okay.
And that produced rum. So the only exception up until the time I demitted office was St. Kitts and Nevis, and because they did not produce rum, but all of the other former colonies. So all of the WIRSPA members were either former colonies of Spain, Britain, and the Netherlands.
Okay, interesting. So not as much the French Caribbean then.
They had their own organization called CERTDOM, and when I was the chairman, we had a memorandum of understanding that we would support each other in areas of mutual interest.
That's really interesting, and I think it's so interesting to think about all of the interplay of all of the different nations and how that works together, and bringing all those people together to get things kind of done, or at least, to, as you describe in some cases, just a mutual understanding. I imagine is a difficult task at sometimes. In fact, I would say, as I was researching, I saw an online article that you did back in 2012 for Got Rum, where you spoke with Paul Senf about the progress of the Authentic Caribbean Rum marque, the ACR marque.
That's correct.
And you mentioned it specifically, you said it was, quote, the subject of much debate within the WIRSPA fraternity. And I was hoping and going to ask, are you able to talk with us now a little bit more about that debate and how it progressed through the rest of your time spent at WIRSPA and where it stood when you exited?
I will give you just a brief outline. Of course, even WIRSPA is a trade association, but each member country would have its own specific ideas on how to do things.
Right.
WIRSPA did not get into the commercial business of individual companies. It was there really to promote the category of Caribbean rum in general. So when the concept of the Authentic Caribbean Rum mark was proposed, obviously there would have been differences within the member countries as to what the mark should be and how one would qualify to be able to use the mark. And that was an ongoing discussion for quite a while. Eventually, the members agreed to a basic set of principles, which I think worked quite well. And it was then up to the individual brands themselves to use the mark in ways that they see fit, which would be in accordance with the guidelines which were set out.
Which is really interesting because I didn't know as much about the ACR mark until I saw that article. So I immediately went to my rum collection and started looking at all of the Caribbean rums that are a part of WIRSPA. And I found that there were a couple that actually did use the mark, and I had just not seen it before. And then there were some that didn't. And so the first thought I had was, well, I wonder why some of these really well-known brands are not using that mark. It seems like a great thing. So that was something I had meant to ask you about is, what, in your opinion, why are some people adopting this more than others?
Well, again, the Caribbean rum industry, it's not, shall we say, uniform in that you have very large, well-known producers and then smaller producers who are better known within their own country. So the ones with the international presence, they may have felt that their brand, right, was better known than the Authentic Caribbean Rum mark itself. And they have chosen not to include it on their label. That doesn't mean that they couldn't have included it on things like the letterhead, et cetera, right? So how you use the mark is dependent on your own particular strategy for marketing. And WIRSPA does not get into that.
Yeah, I know I've seen, some countries even kind of have their own, something that would compare to kind of the ACR mark. Like I know Puerto Rico has Rums of Puerto Rico program that has its own mark that producers can use if they meet certain production standards. And I know, if you go and look at different Puerto Rican brands, you'll see the exact same thing of, some of them using the mark, some of them not using it, some of them using it on some rums, but not others. So yeah, there's always a lot of different factors that go into that. But I can't imagine, it seems like just a monumental task working with that many producers from different countries trying to agree on a set of standards, because I mean anyone who watches kind of the dialogue of the rum community online, they see even with things like GIs and stuff like that, it can be a challenge just for producers in one country to get on the same page with things like this.
There's a lot of flexibility in that. The basic regulation underpinning the Authentic Caribbean Rum mark was the CARICOM rum standard. And then there were other requirements depending, because there was more than one tier to the mark. And a company may have some products which would not qualify for use with the mark, because it just did not conform to the regulations. However, as far as I'm aware, when I demitted office as WIRSPA chairman, all of the companies within the WIRSPA fraternity, they had applied for and received a license to use the mark, even if they didn't use it.
Okay.
So earlier in the conversation, Dr. Ward, you mentioned something specifically which I thought was interesting, which is how you went about the idea of the Mount Gilboa white rum or unaged, and how you kind of earmarked that with tequila as a different spirit category and trying to see a rum in the same way. So I think fast forwarding to now, a lot of conversation in the rum world does center on the idea of rum taking the next big step, if you will, as a spirit category, especially with certain types of rums, like as you mentioned, a white rum being categorized in that way. Do you agree that rum needs to take the next big step in that way? And if so, how do we move forward and gain that sort of respectability in a similar way to Scotch or bourbon or other spirits?
Well, Caribbean rum in general has a certain degree of respectability. And the other thing with the Authentic Caribbean Rum mark, it really brought to the consumers what Caribbean rum was all about. And it was just not simply the production process. There was the provenance, the heritage, everything. And the campaign for the marque, it originally started in 3 countries, in the UK, Spain, and Italy. And then in the follow-up campaign, it was expanded to France, Germany, the US, and Canada. And what that campaign did, it targeted, as part of the PR, the bartenders in all of these countries to educate them on not how to make rum, not how to make drinks, but educating them on what Caribbean rum was all about. The production processes, again, the heritage, the provenance, the history. And what that did was to create a great awareness of the category of rum itself, which was then used by other bigger brands, because I think that Authentic Caribbean Rum marque campaign really brought forward to the consumer that rum, especially Caribbean rum, is a quality product. It wasn't just a party drink. So you should go on the WIRSPA website and have a look at what the Authentic Caribbean Rum campaign did, because I think it's still on the website. Because what we were really...
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah, I looked at it and I was amazed actually at it. And that's why I was surprised, like I said earlier, that I didn't see as much of it being adopted and it wasn't as well known to me as I thought maybe it should have been. Because I said, wow, that's a really interesting and good marque. It's got a lot of highlights to that. And it surprised me, frankly, that I wasn't as aware of it. And actually, I asked a few of my rum friends here in Miami and in Florida across the state. And I said, hey, are you very familiar with this? And they said, no. Most of them were not, or they had heard it in passing, but that hadn't really been aware of it. And when I made them aware of it, we all agreed that it was awesome and a great idea. So we'll look forward in the future.
It was a groundbreaking campaign. I don't think that there is a lot of effort being put into maintaining the campaign, because of course you will appreciate that costs money, a lot of money. When that campaign was first developed, and it was paid for by a grant which was given to the rum industry by the European Union. So that's how we were able to reach so many markets, and we were able to educate so many different people. And the key thing there was that rum was not just for mixing with Coke, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
It could be sipped on its own. There are so many different styles of rum coming from the different countries, and you can use rum, consume rum in a way that was not done before, as an after dinner drink, pair it with chocolate, things like that. So it was really groundbreaking. And what it really tried to do at that time was to say, here we have a quality product which has centuries of history, very, very, very interesting history, slavery, et cetera, and it's intimately involved with the sugar cane industry, which is still big in some countries, as well as the tourism industry. So it has a cross-cutting appeal for more than one industry. But the key thing was that Caribbean rum, and I'm being specific, Caribbean rum is a quality rum which can stand on its own in comparison to things like cognac and single malt, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we talk so much now about, the additional progress that can be made in the idea of raising people's conceptions of rum and what it can be and how to appreciate it. It's easy to lose sight of like the progress that has been made. I wasn't of drinking age all the way back in 1998, so I can't speak as much to what prevailing sentiments about rum were like at the time. But I would imagine that over the course of your career, I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you saw at least some evolution in consumer perception or attitudes of Caribbean rum compared when you started to by the time you stepped away from Mount Gilboa and WIRSPA.
It was a huge evolution because certainly in the Caribbean, rum was seen as a drink for the rum shops, a down market drink. If you wanted to impress someone, you drank scotch or you drank cognac. But where we are right now, rum is seen as a quality product in its own right, especially some of the special bottlings from various distilleries. So it is seen there as a high-end product. We need to do a little bit more work in improving the price point, moving it up. But it certainly has, in many quarters, gotten traction and appreciation from a number of, shall we say, discerning consumers.
Yeah, well, we would agree with that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
and that's exactly what we're trying to do. Yeah, go ahead.
This whole concept of rum being the next best thing, I've been hearing that since we started the Authentic Caribbean Rum campaign. And I think that one of the drawbacks for the category as a whole is that it's produced in so many different places, and the regulations governing how it is produced vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Right.
So I am very, very specific in saying that Caribbean rum, as exemplified by the WIRSPA members, that is a category of rum which deserves a great deal of recognition and respect.
Right. It's interesting because you look at a category like whiskey and people understand there's Scotch, there's bourbon, single malt, Irish whiskey. There's all these different kinds of it that have the Canadian whiskey, etc. In many ways, rum is I think we would all say rum is even more diverse than whiskey, but it's kind of everything gets lumped together, and it's very hard for consumers to sort of discern differences between places without a whole lot of education and campaigns like the one you mentioned to kind of show what's distinct about Caribbean rum versus rum from other parts of the world.
Correct. That's correct, and it will still be a work in progress. And let's not forget that the driver of the rum category in general, overall, is still the spiced rum category.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I was just in a liquor store the other day, and I was buying some sweet vermouth. Because I like to have some on hand to make Manhattans and Negronis and things like that. And the cashier asked me, he was like, "Oh, you getting this to make some Manhattans? What kind of whiskey do you use?" And I was like, "Actually, I like to make Manhattans a lot with an aged rum." Mm-hmm. And his response was, "Hey, have you tried that?" The Kraken rum, and I was like, not to talk down on any specific brand, but I kind of said to him, well, I tend to lean away from spiced rums, and I kind of prefer rums without all kinds of ingredients added to them. So usually, if I'm making a cocktail, it's going to be a white rum or an aged rum, and he just didn't really have much of a response to that. And that was someone who worked in a liquor store, so it's definitely like I think we get lost in how much a lot of people's idea of what rum is actually just spiced rum.
What I also think the brand should do is that instead of continuing to preach to the converted, go out there and find the ones who really don't know much about rum and try and get them on board. But I think it has to be a concerted effort. No single company, certainly in the Caribbean, is going to be able to do that effectively. It has to be a concerted effort. And not so long ago, I remember passing through Miami. This is about 2 years ago, and at immigration, the immigration officer was asking me, questions. I said, "Well, I'm associated with the rum industry. What rum? What rum?" And I said, "Mount Gay." "Nope, never heard of it." "Have you heard of it?" "Have you heard of Apple?" I said, "Have you heard of Appleton?" "Nope, never heard of it." "Eldorado?"
"Oh, wow."
"Nope, never heard of it." I said, "So what rum do you know?" "Oh, Ron Rico, Captain Morgan."
Yep, I think we're all used to having those conversations. When I know when a friend asks me, what rum should I try for the first time? Like many of those exact brands you just listed, like Mount Gay and Appleton, are always in the conversation when I recommend rums to a new consumer, and most of the time they have never heard of them. Yes. So yeah, there's definitely still a long way to go. So shifting gears a little bit to what you're doing now, which you touched on earlier in the conversation, consulting work. How would you kind of describe the past 3 years, operating as an independent consultant? Has it been a fairly straightforward transition, or have you kind of had to adjust to it and change the way you kind of look at the projects you're working on now relative to what you were doing prior?
I didn't have any plans to be doing consulting work in a very great way, because I just wanted to sit back and enjoy life for a change compared to what I was doing for the last 15 years or so, But it got to the point where like, okay, I'm not doing anything. If you ask me for help, I will help. But I don't market myself out there. If you come to me and you need some work done, I will help you. For example, Pepe Alvarez from Rumcast, right?
Yes.
And that was actually quite interesting and enjoyable, because he did have a number of ideas that resonated with me as to how he wanted to make his rum. And he did it painstakingly over a number of years, putting his distillery together. So he does have the ideas that I can appreciate. So I'm saying that if it's something that is of interest to me, I will go, yeah, okay, fine. It's not, I'm not going to bother.
Yeah.
So I'm not out there.
You've got to feel passionate about it.
Yes. I'm not out there. So I wouldn't call I have to call myself something, an independent consultant, because I'm still
right.
I'm way too young to call myself retired, you see.
Sure. Well, and it's interesting that you bring up Pepe Alvarez and Ron Pepon for listeners who are unfamiliar, which I think a lot of people would be, because it's a very, I think they're just about getting set to release their first product under that brand, but it's a distillery in Puerto Rico that is growing their own sugar cane. They are producing a rum from fresh cane juice. And it's a really cool operation. I was lucky enough to visit there right before the pandemic happened, actually, and sample some of what they're working on. And actually, Pepe, he was telling me about all the work that had gone into it, and he mentioned that you had come to do some consulting, and that was one of the moments where I was like, oh wow, okay, they're really serious about this. They're bringing in people like with the experience level of Frank Ward. You mentioned some of the aspects of that, of what he's trying to do resonated with you. Can you say like specifically what aspect of his approach you find appealing or resonated with you in particular?
Certainly. Small batch, primarily pot still rum. What's a pot still rum? Mm-hmm. He was using his own sugar cane, and he wanted to revive some of the heirloom varieties of cane in Puerto Rico. And his setup was such that it gave him the flexibility to produce different kinds of distillate. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he has those big kind of cognac style pot stills that were actually in Trinidad before, which I'm sure they were used in production of a brand called Tin Cane Rum. But then he also has the more what is it? Is it a Holstein still? It's like a Holstein still, like a hybrid pot still he has there as well. Yeah. I remember going into their little back room. They have like kind of a tasting laboratory, and there were just so many vials of samples of rums, done with different distillation methods in there. And it was a rum geek's paradise for sure.
That's because I spent, whenever I go, I would spend about 4 or 5 days there. And literally, we would look at, first and foremost, was to get his fermentation up to scratch, so maximize the yield of alcohol from the mash, and then encourage his son to play around with the various types of distillations.
Yeah,
you have the Chauvignac, the Holstein with the column on top, and there are so many different things that you can do. So that I found really, really, really interesting.
Well, yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing that product get out and seeing the more global rum community being introduced to it. So hopefully people hear this and get excited about that and get a chance to see the yield of some of your consulting work. So whenever I'm introducing rum to a friend who is less familiar with it, as I just mentioned earlier, like without fail, I'm going to talk about Barbados rum in some capacity. And I'm always afraid that I'm not going to do justice to the category in my description. So I wanted to ask you, as someone with more Barbados rum experience than 99.9% of people out there, how do you describe the category of Barbados rum and what makes it distinct from rums of other nations?
It's a relatively, most of them are relatively light in flavor. It's not very, very heavy on the palate. And again, within that category, you have different styles. So you will have your white rum, you will have, say, an Eclipse rum, you have it's talking about Mount Gilboa now. They're white, Eclipse, Black Barrel, XO. So each of those have a different flavor profile. It's probably related to the amount of pot still rum that goes into each blend. But one of the signature things about Barbados rum is that you can always taste a little bit of pot still in it. It's not heavy. It's not as heavy as a Jamaican rum, where their pot still production is slightly different.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because I think one of the things that always comes to mind for me with Barbados rum is this idea of balance. And, I'm sensing some of that in the description of, there's always sort of that blend of pot and column still. And I don't know. That's just what I really think of when I think of Barbados rum, is something that's really balanced and delightful in a lot of ways.
That's why I called it. It's a light, as in not light as in a white rum light kind of a way, but it doesn't have a great deal of mouth feel to the point where it's accessible. Barbados rum is very, very accessible if you want to do it as a first experience. And you have the range. So it's not just the Mount Gay range. You have the range from Foursquare rum distillery. You will have the rums from West Indies rum distillery, right? And then you have the little one in the north, Larry Warren, St. Nicholas Island. Now, if I am drinking rum, I will drink rum from whichever island I am in. But in Barbados, the rums that I will drink, which would resonate with my palate, would primarily be Cockspur Old Gold, Dorley's XO, Mount Gay Eclipse, and the Mount Gay Silver white rum.
I love that we have a list now for everyone. Everyone can go out and buy those rums now and have the Frank Ward approved set of Barbados rums.
No, that is simply because I am not a great lover of aged rums. That's not really appealing to my palate. Very aged rums I can appreciate, but I wouldn't go for an aged rum as my first choice. I do also like white rums, right? And I've always said that if you're dealing with a white rum that's not been aged and then decolorized, just straight off the still and bottled, it's a very, very good expression of the distiller's craft. How well you can make white rum says a lot about how well you can make rum in general.
Definitely. I see that for sure. The distillate speaks for itself. Right?
That is correct.
Yeah. So this is always a tough question, but I think it's a good one to kind of, as we're coming to a close, to ask. In recognition of your long career, where you're obviously very successful, I wanted to ask you, when you look back at the decades you've spent in the rum industry and in other roles like at WIRSPA, is there anything that sticks out to you as a pinnacle moment of success for you, or maybe something that you've thought to yourself, man, I wish I had done that differently? Are there moments that you hold on to?
There are a number of things that I wish I could have done differently, without a doubt, because hindsight is a wonderful thing. But two of the things that I'm especially proud of is the Mount Gilboa brand.
Yeah.
And secondly, my role at WIRSPA at the time of the Authentic Caribbean Rum campaign. Those are the two highlights I would want to mention. There are a few others, but if I had to mention those two, it would be those two.
Yeah, certainly things worth being proud of. And if any listeners out there are lucky enough to have their own little stash of Mount Gilboa, take a picture and tag us on social media. It would be fun to kind of see different people enjoying that rum to this day. So Frank, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. It's been fascinating learning more about the history of Mount Gay and your involvement with WIRSPA and your whole career. Before we go, we always like to end these interviews with an optional segment, kind of a bonus round. It's a round of rapid fire questions. That John is the host of. Yeah. So if you are up for that, if it sounds like fun to you, again, it's optional, though encouraged.
Sure.
Okay. Well,
all right.
My role in all this is as timekeeper, so I will put a minute on the clock. And John, whenever you are ready, you may go.
Okay. Neat or on the rocks?
On the rocks.
Column, pot, or a blend?
Pot.
All right, I think I know the answer to this, but Mount Gay or Mount Gilboa?
Mount Gilboa, of course.
Is it true that within WIRSPA headquarters, they have a sauna and massage parlor that's called the WIRSPA?
Nope. Nope.
But it should be. Favorite person to share a bottle of rum with?
Any friend of mine.
All right. In your opinion, what place in the world outside of the Caribbean makes the best rum?
That was an answer.
All right.
I love it.
We're all aware of how great the Habitation Valier Last Word release is and how it's nearly impossible to find now. Is there any chance that there will ever be a last word release?
I am sure there will be, but you'll have to speak to Billy about that.
That's right, and maybe we can call it Afterward.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Ooh, I like that.
Kate, Perry, and Luca, we're available for ideas. All right. Referring to rum made in Barbados, do you prefer the term Bajan, Barbadian, or just Barbados rum?
Barbados rum.
Okay. The best master distiller or blender you've ever worked with?
Jerry Edwards.
After you consult with a rum producer now, do you provide a Frank Ward mark of approval for them?
No, because no.
That's time. We got through all of them. Excellent work,
yes.
Frank.
That was very good. We hope you enjoyed that as much as we did.
I certainly did.
Hey, Future John here, checking in to let you all know that, as Will mentioned in the episode intro, that this is the part where we thought everything was kind of wrapping up, but quickly found out that Dr. Ward had more to say, especially about the Barbados GI. We didn't want you all to miss out on this great section of our discussion, so without any further ado, we present you with our first Rumcast Overtime interview section, and here it is.
If you want to start with the GI, obviously, I know that's, you're at ground zero for that discussion. So I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on where that is currently and what you hope to see come out of it.
Well, I think it hasn't gone anywhere because you would be aware if you've been following social media that it has generated a great deal of passion.
Yeah, for sure. That's putting it lightly.
Yeah. My view is that from a commercial point of view, it is not going to enhance the image of Barbados rum at all. That's my view, because Barbados rum has been around for centuries. You have some very strong brands in their own right, and the brands are to many people more recognizable than the concept of a Barbados GI. A GI for me, it's a device that's based on the reputation of the product. It is not specifically a determinant of product quality, or shall we say, it's a means for regulating the product. For that, we have what is called the CARICOM rum standard and the Barbados version.
Okay.
So the GI should really speak to the reputation of the product, right? It will be underpinned by the rum standard, but speaks to reputation. And I am more than a little discomfited by the, shall we say, lack of unanimity among the producers as to what should and should not be included in the GI. Straight up, I do not believe that Barbados rum has a reputation for being on the sweet side. It does not have that reputation, and it should maintain that reputation. Yeah. But this is something that needs to be discussed. Huh? Certainly, when you look at it from a biochemical perspective, there is a threshold below which you cannot taste any sweeteners at all. It could be there, but you're not going to taste it. Yeah, it's not readily apparent. So the whole question surrounding the issue of the Barbados GI really has a lot to do with should sweeteners be added and how much. I don't think that the practice that is happening today should continue in country where it's not added, as far as I'm aware, and that should continue. That's my view. However, having said that, when some people talk about rum not having any additives, I don't like that word additives at all. Right?
Why not?
Because it gives the connotation that something underhand is being done, and that's not necessarily the case. Rum coming off of a still, it's generally colorless, and it has the characteristics of a rum taste. When you put in a barrel, you are intentionally making sure that additives get into the barrel. See what I mean?
Right. So you're saying barrels, in a sense, barrels could be argued as a form of additive since they're adding something to the character of the distillate.
That is correct. And then we go further. When you finish it in a barrel of a different type, say port or sherry, you will be adding a certain amount of sweetener there also.
It's interesting. Going back to what you said, I think, and correct me if I heard wrong or misinterpreted, I took it as you saying you think the reputation of Barbados rum should remain as something that is not sweetened.
That's good.
But at the same time, it sounds like your view is that the GI would not be the right way to accomplish maintaining that reputation. Am I interpreting that correctly?
No, from what I can tell is that there are some who would like for the GI to allow for the addition of sweeteners. That is something that I do not agree with. Yeah, because GI speaks to reputation. A reputation as we know it, not reputation as it was, say, 200 years ago, as we know it in a contemporary way today. So, say 200 years ago, Barbados used to add lots of sugar to the rum. They don't. They have not been doing so for decades. Yeah. So that's where the reputation of Barbados rum lies in what has been done over the last, say, 100 years or so. So that to me is what it's all about. But and again, you have a GI for Barbados rum. Where is the infrastructure to manage the GI? Because if there are infringements against the GI, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to take legal action, seek legal redress? All of that has not been delved into yet. And I still believe that GI for Barbados rum is not going to confer any commercial advantage. It may provide some legal protections, yes, but a commercial advantage, no, I don't think so.
Okay. So then, while you agree with producers who think sweetening should not be allowed with Barbados rum, the GI may not be the best mechanism with which to enforce or protect that or add commercial value, it sounds like.
I don't think so. I don't think so. You can have a GI, yeah. You can have a GI which prohibits the adding of sweeteners, yes, but, and then there will be those who will adhere to it, yeah. But the thing is, it should be something that all of the producers agree on. They should have some sort of a common position on what really makes Barbados rum Barbados rum. And as again I said, it's a reputational thing. What is the in your view as a consumer? What for you is the reputation of Barbados rum?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's what I've always seen when Barbados rum is discussed in rum circles is it's a category where you can expect to find rum that has not been sweetened, and has kind of those characteristics I mentioned earlier of being balanced, honest age statements, that sort of thing. That's what I think of as the reputation of Barbados rum.
There you go. So from a perspective as a consumer, there is something that you expect of Barbados rum, and that is based on the reputation that you know, based on your sampling of Barbados rums. So that's what the GI should be all about.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, I think the fear some people have is that if there are, an increase in products labeled Barbados rum on the market that have been sweetened, that reputation could be threatened or changed in some way over time.
Well, there's a way also for doing shall we say a different type of labeling. To go back to the Authentic Caribbean Rum marque, some of the distilleries, they produce products which would not comply with the requirements of the Authentic Caribbean Rum marque, and those products were excluded from being able to use the mark.
Right.
You have, again, there will be a very, very specific set of criteria as to what constitutes Barbados rum. You can have a product with sweetener, and then you can say a product of Barbados, made in Barbados, right? But to have the two names, Barbados rum, that's different. So, and I'm very, very a little disenchanted, as I said, with what I read on social media as to people's views on how rum is made. Frankly speaking, you have a number of persons who are very passionate about rum, and they make statements without really fully understanding what they're talking about. Don't deny their passion at all, but they don't really understand what they're talking about.
Right. Do you sense that when you say that, you're meaning more enthusiastic consumers and, people who are very active in online rum groups and things
correct.
like that?
They do make a lot of statements online, and I can't deny their passion, but they don't really understand what they're saying.
What do you wish they understood more about it?
Again, there is a saying that too much information is not good, because it's not just how you receive information, it's how you actually interpret the information. And if you interpret the information incorrectly, then you're going to be all at sea. So it actually is up to, again, the producers to explain what they're doing and why they're doing it and how they're doing it. To go into very, very granular detail about whether this barrel was laid down in 2002 in a warm environment. That is, for me, that is like a lot of information that really does not have much to do with how you will describe the product. So you take the whole concept of tropically aged for 5 years and then aged in wherever for another 2 years. According to the regulation, that's a 7-year rum, full stop. Yeah, 7-year rum. So you may say that 7 years age in a temperate climate is not the same as 5 years in a tropical climate and 2 years in a temperate climate. That is something that your taste will determine. So I am not going to look at the label and say, okay, this has been aged for 5 years in the tropics and then 2 years in the temperate climate. That doesn't mean it's going to be better. I may try it and I just won't like it. So it's a 7-year rum, right?
Well, and I think it's interesting going back to even what you were talking about, your own enjoyment of rums earlier, in that like the Mount Gilboa, for example, you prefer at a younger age because there are certain characteristics that are only available at those ages. And I think it's interesting because so often the assumption and this isn't just rum, it's whiskey as well, more years equals better rum. But that's not really the case.
That is
entirely subjective when you apply that.
It also depends on the type of barrel that you have used, whether that barrel was once filled, 2 filled, 3 filled, it really does matter. And then again, I don't see the point in people coming out with, well, I have this rum and it was aged in, say, a tequila barrel. Why? You're doing it just because you can?
So, going back to the idea of barrels adding something to rum, particularly if you're using something like a port cask or a sherry cask, adding sweetness, is that something that you wish you saw less of?
I actually do not.
Barbados rum.
My view is that, and I speak specifically for Barbados rum and the reputational quality, where Barbados rum is not known for being sweet. I have no problem with producers, right, sweetening their rum if it is done in accordance to the regulations that exist in the land of production. If you like your rum slightly sweet, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that at all. But it is not suitable for my palate. But I'm not going to tell you that you should not drink a sweetened rum. No, that's not it at all. Where you have the finishings in different barrels, well, yes, they actually can enhance the overall experience of the rum. And I will give you one specific example. Foursquare port cask finish. Okay. That's an excellent example of how rum is finished in a different. Wonderful example. Okay, so I don't object to finishing in different woods at all. I don't object to sweetening in general either. If that is what your regulations allow, well, let it be so. But in the specific instance of Barbados rum, I don't think it should be intentionally sweet.
And the solution to that to you is something other than
yes, that can be done. It can be done through the mechanism of GI. There's nothing amiss with that. As I said, you can have a rum that was made in Barbados and it's sweetened, and you call it X rum made in Barbados, but you're not calling it Barbados rum. See?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough, it's a difficult conversation, as we talked about the ACR mark earlier, and how challenging I imagine it was, for you to get that to where it was. And I think what makes this even harder now is, as you said, the online conversations sometimes have so much passion, as you put it, which I think is a very nice, judicious way of putting it. That it makes it hard to, have a reasonable discussion about it. And frankly, I find myself tuning out more, Facebook groups and stuff like that more and more. I find when you're talking rum with someone face to face, or at least, as close to face as we can get right now, those conversations tend to be more productive, even if you end up disagreeing.
That was my little rant, so to speak.
No, I'm glad. I'm so glad you brought that up. And John actually had a meeting he had to drop off of. He sent me a text though, and told me to make sure I tell you he really enjoyed the conversation, and apologize that he had to duck out early. But yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned this before we went, so we had a chance to talk about it. Because this is stuff that rum enthusiasts want to hear about, especially a voice like yours that played and continues to play such influential role in Barbados rum. So I'm happy to have.
My part in short is that your readers, as far as I'm concerned, drink Caribbean rum. Whether it's from Guyana,
absolutely,
St. Lucia. St. Lucia makes excellent rums also. Excellent.
Yes. I was just having that conversation. I was on a Zoom call with some local rum enthusiasts here in Nashville, where I live. And we were kind of going around sharing what we were drinking. And I was drinking a St. Lucia rum, and two other people were as well. And all of us were like, St. Lucia rum is so good, and it's unique, it's distinctive, and it's a category that I'm excited. I feel like there's excitement growing for it, and I'm happy about it.
One of the unsung heroes of the rum industry is actually the late Laurie Barnard, who was the managing director of St. Lucia Distillers. He unfortunately passed a few years ago from cancer, but he was very, very perceptive in the way he saw the rum industry developing, and he took steps. He was way ahead of a lot of the other distilleries at the time, because he started doing some really, really wonderful and innovative things. Pity he passed.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. One of the things about St. Lucia distillers that I find interesting, especially some of those Chairman's Reserve, master selections where they have rums from individual stills or blends of rums from certain stills, getting to taste, the
Yep.
difference that those distillation methods or stills themselves imparted in the rums, and getting to compare them is really fun for me. So yeah, St. Lucia rum, a recommendation. After you've had Barbados rum, of course.
Actually, as I said, I told you, if I will drink rum in the island where I am at the specific time. So
that's a great approach to it.
I drink Trinidad rum when I'm in Trinidad.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when you go to a new place, you want to sample the local cuisine, right? The local food, the dishes that they're known for. So why wouldn't you drink the rum they make?
My view is that rum is the best drink ever invented.
I agree with you. That is and one statement that is not controversial in the rum community, thankfully.
I always remember my great uncle who used to run Mount Gilboa distilleries earlier days, because he was the one who really got me into drinking rum, because I used to have to go to his office every day at lunchtime and have a few drinks with him. And mostly pot still rum, because he loved pot still rum. And he always said to me, never trust a man who doesn't drink rum.
Words to live by. I think my grandfather somehow forgot that one when I was visiting him as a child. So someday when I have grandkids, I'll have to share that advice with them as well and pass it along.
Wonderful.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to this episode with Dr. Frank Ward. If you want to find out more info about all of the stuff mentioned in the episode, check out the show notes. We've put links up to a lot of that stuff, so you can go and find out more information about it. As always, if this episode raised any questions for you, if there's anything you'd like to hear about on future episodes, please send us an email, host@rumcast.com. That's HOST@rumcast.com. And we'd love to hear from you. John, anything else to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, only thing is our social media presence continues to grow as well. We're really thankful for the conversations that are happening there also on Instagram. It's Rumcast on Instagram and also Rumcast at Facebook. So we're happy to continue those conversations there as well and get the feedback. We love hearing the feedback. In fact, I think, Will, we have a pretty good plan for 2021 of who we want to talk to. And we've got some things lined up that we're excited about. But as you said, we want to hear from you all. Who do we need to talk to? Who's in this industry that you want to hear from, that you want to hear more about? What subjects do we need to talk about that are going to tickle your fancy as rum geeks?
Yeah.
Give us that information. Continue to engage us, whether it's host@rumcast.com or on social media. We love to hear from you, and really thank you all for listening. I'm really excited about 2021, Will.
Same. Thanks, everyone, and we'll talk again soon.
All right.